One of the first things to consider when aiming to make your user journey simulate the real world correctly is how data will vary between different users running the business transaction in the real world. Because of the variation in the real world, you should parameterize some of the data values that were recorded during the user journey recording process. Stress Tester uses the term dynamic data for a value that will be changed during a performance test. The first data I entered into the browse and buy user journey was my search criteria when I searched for books. As you can see in the description, I searched for Java during the recording, and looking at the post variables within this request, I can see the word Java as the title. To change this into a parameter, I simply select it, right click, and click Convert to Dynamic Data. This starts the Add Dynamic Data wizard, and after the information page, I'm asked whether I want to insert an existing parameter that I've previously configured or create a new parameter. I'm going to create a new parameter, so the next thing I have to decide is the type of parameter. Stress Tester offers a number of types of parameters. The first one is auto increment. This allows a sequence of numbers to be generated, incrementing or decrementing by a certain amount, and the number that's returned can actually be prefixed and suffixed by literals. This allows you to generate telephone numbers, zip codes, email addresses, etc. Constant always returns the same value. Date generates dates, and dates can be generated in whatever format and to whatever level of resolution that you require. Delimited file will return values from a file. Java class allows Stress Tester to call out to a Java class that implements a certain interface, or out to a .NET class in order to retrieve the values that should be used during the performance test. Response allows you to extract values from the application that are returned during the performance test and then use those subsequently in subsequent requests. This is covered in a separate tutorial. And Related allows you to create one dynamic data from a source that's already been defined in another one. As search terms are typed in by the user, I can't extract them from the application response. They don't fit into any of the other criteria, and therefore I'll store my search terms in a file outside of Stress Tester. So I choose the delimited file type, and next. I'm then asked to give a name to this parameter, and I will call it search term, and also I can specify a description. The next thing I need to consider is how the values within the delimited file will be shared amongst simulated users. One user only means that each user will get its own copy of the delimited file. All users will mean that one copy of the file is shared amongst all of the simulated users during the performance test. I'm going to have a file of search terms. It's valid for users to search for the same thing, and therefore I would choose all users. Finally, I have to decide how often I want the value that a simulated user is using to be refreshed during the performance test. Once per run would mean that one simulated user retrieved a value, and then all simulated users for all iterations of the user journey for the whole of the performance test use the same value. That's obviously not correct when you think I'm trying to simulate what happens in the real world where different users are using different search terms. Every cycle would mean that a user would get a new value for the search term at the beginning of every cycle or iteration of the user journey, and we use it for the whole duration of the user journey. Once per user would mean that the user would actually get a value and keep using that for the whole of the performance test, and every time means that every time that the dynamic data variable appears within the user journey, a new value is used. I'm actually going to say every time, because when I've completed this user journey, I will probably have my users simulating more than one search during the cycle of the business transaction. I click Next. I then have to specify the file that contains my search terms. specify which column the search terms are within that file, if it's a multi-column file, and also the delimiter for the file, and finally how Stress Tester should serve up the values within the column to the simulated users. First would always result in the first value within the file, so the value on the first line to be used. Last, conversely, would always use the last. Those aren't valid again because we wouldn't have the randomness of search terms. Random allows values to be served up in a random manner. One of the drawbacks of a random manner is that more than one simulated user could get the same value at the same time. Random unique again serves up the values in a random order. However, once a value is served, it will never be used again. Sequential reads the file from the first line to the last line and then goes back to the first line and repeats. Sequential unique reads the file from the first line to the last line and then the test stops. I actually don't mind if my users use the same search term. That would be valid when a new book is released into the bookstore, and therefore I would choose the type random. When I'm happy with my selections, I click the Finish button, and as you can see, the literal that I recorded Java has now been replaced with the dynamic data item search term. To save that away, I click the Save button.